Hello and welcome to another episode of the Game Design Podcast. Once again, my name is Brad Carney and I am the founder of Final Boss Entertainment, who recently developed Rekt. If you're unfamiliar with Rekt, just imagine the Marvel Comics of Doom. I don't really know what that means. And then you have Rekt. And hey, speaking of Rekt, it is currently on sale on Steam for the next week or so. So if you are interested in checking it out, you can head on over to Steam and pick it up for 60% off. So this week we're continuing our series on arena shooters. Last week I talked with Jay Hard, who gave us more of a player's perspective on shooters. And this week we're focusing more on the development side of things. I'll be talking with Winters, who's one of the developers of the upcoming arena shooter #Rekt. We'll get into all sorts of interesting topics, ranging from the challenge of balancing weapons, the importance of knowing your audience, to even the surprising role glitches and oversights can play in having a fun arena shooter. It's more important than you might think, and we'll get into why. We'll also talk about the gaming industry and the role of marketing when it comes to arena shooters. Now, this is a podcast focusing on game design and not general game development, but for a genre like arena shooters, it's definitely something that can't be ignored. Your audience is certainly important and can't be ignored when it comes to any game, but this is critical when it comes to arena shooters. A single-player game can be played and enjoyed by someone even if they're the last man on Earth, but a competitive multiplayer game? If somebody logs in to play and there's nobody else to play with, they're not going to be able to play. Appealing to a large enough audience is something that has to be taken into consideration when designing a game. Alright, well, on to my conversation with Winters, and I'll be back at the end to wrap things up. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You're working on the game Rekt, right? Or is it #Rekt?
Yeah, #Rekt, the hot new arena shooter that everybody's talking about from Hell Legit Games. Yes, it is very much, I guess, a throwback to the old school kind of arena shooters, but we are trying to not slavishly so. It's definitely a modern game, but
right.
I don't know. Just the idea of arena shooters alone, and I heard you and Jay Hart talk about this kind of in your first podcast on arena shooters, is that there is a bit of nostalgia involved. It's kind of inevitable. So, you know, there's ways to kind of, tread that line, I suppose, and that's kind of what we're hoping for.
It's definitely a tricky line to tread, because on the one hand, if you're too nostalgic, then it's like you're only appealing to the people who remember, and you're not bringing in a new audience. And then if you try and make it too new and too modern, then probably the people who would be interested in the first place aren't all that interested. So it's definitely a tricky thing.
Yeah, because we at QuakeCon last year, of course, we got to put it in the hands of a lot of the pro players and so forth. And then we did a convention shortly after that in Central Texas where we sort of dealt with more of the general public, where it's like, okay, press W to move forward kind of people.
Right.
And I liked the kind of, dichotomy of that, the idea of trying to make something that has appeal in both places.
Sure.
And we've seen games try that and fail. I would say, games like Shootmania come to mind, where they tried to make something that was tournament oriented, but very, very simple. I mean, just distilled down to its most simplistic form. And it was a little too much, I think, that, some of the pro players, whether this is true or not, now people scoff when I say this, but some of the pro guys told me that they had hit the skill level.
Mm-hmm.
They had reached the top of the skill curve.
And therefore
there was
right?
there was nothing more for them to, there were not a higher ceiling for them to go as far as what they could achieve with the game. Now, whether that's really true or not, I don't know, but that's
right.
how people felt, and that's what they said. So
Yeah, and people can definitely get that wrong. I know at one point, this fighting game I play, about 2 years into it, there were people who were already getting disenfranchised with it because they felt like, oh, everything's already been discovered, everyone's already capped out. And this was on year 2 of like 11 of the game's life cycle. This was before like a ton was discovered, like unblockable moves and stuff. And so, basically they thought they had capped out when they really hadn't. But yeah, I do want to mention real quick that it does seem like it's a big thing for competitive and high level players. Like they want there to be that extra challenge, something higher to strive for, more to learn, more to improve upon from them as a player. So,
for sure, man. What's the old cliche? Simple to learn, but hard to master.
Yeah.
I think
Tetris.
That's kind of what we're all going for. Yes.
Yeah. And I would think that would be pretty hard to achieve in an arena shooter. But these are people who have probably played countless hours of Quake and Unreal, so they've probably come pretty close to kind of maxing out what they're capable of as players.
Oh, you wouldn't believe some of the ridiculous things, like certain jumps that can only be achieved at a certain amount of frames per second.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Jahar would probably be better to ask about this. But I remember because we had it in Return to Castle Wolfenstein. It was on the Quake 3 engine. And there were certain jumps, like there was one place where we had to jump that I had a toggle button to set to throttle to that, whatever that frames per second was, and it escapes me without Googling it. But only at that could you make that jump.
Wow.
And so, yeah, somebody had to figure that out, right? Somebody had to actually sit there and go, okay, if I'm at 128 frames or whatever it was, then this is doable. But
part of me thinks that's sloppy code, but at the same time, it's like I just appreciate the amount of complexity that goes into that jump.
Well, part of the fun of the Quake-oriented games, the id Software games, was finding the idiosyncrasies of the engine, because it was a built from their own hands kind of engine. And much like Rekt, which, as I'll give you a plug here. I know it was a labor of love.
Thank
man. You. How many years? Several years that you spent creating that engine from scratch, and so that gives you a little bit more room to have some things like that are unique to your game. And now we're starting to see things change a lot with with Unity and Unreal Engine 4, which is what we're using for our game. You can do so much with those that it saves a lot of the early type of development like that. But you probably also gets rid of some of those little quirks that come up through engine design too. Yeah,
I mean, on the one hand, I do think that can be a good thing because the game behaves the way it's intended to. I don't think anyone sits down to design a game and is like, okay, so check this out. At 60 frames a second, you can jump this far, but at 53 frames a second, you can jump this far. Like no one intentionally does that. And I feel like bunny hopping, where it's like when you run and jump, you gain speed. Like I kind of feel like that's like another one of those little oversights, one of those little quirks that no one probably intended, but
that was a happy accident. Yeah, rocket jumping, or in Tribes, which I was a Tribes caster for many years. The idea of skiing, where you're just hitting the space bar and all of a sudden you're gliding along the ground. That was one of those unintended features that became part of how the game was played. And some of these things, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of these things are kind of vestigial in arena shooters. Your bunny hopping and stuff. We strafe jumping, if you will. And some of those were basically because of the engine itself and because of things that people found to exploit the engine. But now they're things that people expect you to build in sometimes to your game. And I don't know, with #Rekt, a lot of the things that we're trying to do are to work around some of the expectations, but still not draw too much, the ire of the community for, good luck with that, right? There's always going to be something.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But, to come up with a unique movement system that has things that remind you of those kinds of movement systems, but is kind of its own thing. And I know that Vormulak, our chief scientist, he's a big Brad Carney fan, so he drew a lot of inspiration from what you've done with Rekt. So
I feel honored to have fans.
You do, man. He told me to be sure and shout you out. So
I appreciate it. So, like, kind of what I'm gathering that you're saying is that for a developer of an arena shooter, it almost sounds like you kind of want to have those like little quirks and glitches. Like it adds new dimensions to the game. It adds new skills to master from the community. So is that something you want, or?
For several reasons, I think so. For one, when we started making this game, we were doing it mostly and we still are, because we wanted a fun game to play for ourselves.
Yeah.
And at the time we started developing this, there weren't a lot of multiplayer arena FPS type of games coming out on the market. Really, none. Nobody had really mentioned anything. Then all of a sudden, boom, there's all these not only big titles like, of course, your Unreal Tournament 4 and some of these other, but a lot of indie titles as well.
Yeah. Why do you think there's kind of been that resurgence of arena FPS?
I think it was just a niche that needed to be filled. There just wasn't anything like it. I know you guys talked in part one of this about how there's a lot of your Call of Duty kind of progression, prestige kind of Skinner box type of shooters, and that's become the norm now. And so part of it, I think, is a reactive thing against that, but also as far as quirks and idiosyncrasies, I mean, again, I come from the esports community, and so when you're talking about a multiplayer shooter, you're talking about, competitive type of situations, whether they're, at the Staples Center or whether it's at some little LAN somewhere. You still want something that has balance, but it has a reason to play that over other games that they could play. That's why being too slavishly retro is a non-starter, because people go, well, why don't you just play Quake?
Exactly, yeah.
And we're already seeing with some of the titles coming out now that are very much influenced by those earlier games, that people just go, well, why don't I just play Quake? Why don't I play this new game?
Is that kind of thing happening in Toxic? Because that's a game that brands itself as frag like it's 1999.
I think to some extent, because of every discussion I see about it, they bring up how much it feels and seems like Unreal 2004 and games like that. I've played Toxic and I really like it. It's a cool game. And seeing some of the talk that the developers have said, I think they're trying to diversify it a little bit. Games like Reflex, which is probably the most popular so far of the new shooters that have come out, and it is very much Quake CPMA. It is pretty much takes that as its blueprint starting point and goes from there. But they are talking about adding a lot of things to that, and some of the features that it has, like map making on the fly, and some of those things are pretty exciting too. So I don't know. Everybody's trying to do something, so it's very difficult to set yourself apart, especially when you're very poor like us and you have no marketing budget and you're doing this for the love of it. Certainly,
I know the feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the most selfless thing you can do is make something that's good for yourself. And if you can do that, then hopefully other people will feel like you feel about it. And that's why we're putting in, like our game is about space wizards.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have wizard powers, or we're putting those in now, where it's just basic little defensive spell type of things that you can do.
Yeah.
But then you're opening up issues of balance, which is also something we're working on.
Yeah, so how do you guys actually go about achieving balance? Because I know that's something that a lot of arena shooters have had a tough time with. You know, whether it's the railgun and a rocket launcher in Quake 3, or I guess the flat cannon probably in Unreal Tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in my what I've seen so far in my years of gaming is that balance is completely determined by the players, and you can test all day long. You can get the best QA people in the world. You can, try to provide whatever solutions, but until you get the game in the hands of people competing,
mm-hmm.
you're not going to know. I mean, we've already had a few tournaments online and at LANs, but the online tournament, like the last one we did, we saw some things that were just like, oh, okay, so they figured out if you do this, then, that's kind of a cheese strat. So it's like, okay, then that's something we need to counter in terms of map design and as far as how the weapons work, damage. I think it's an ongoing process, man. The good thing about making a single-player game is that you can kind of set it and forget it.
Right.
But a multiplayer game, it always has some evolution going, and there's always going to be, oh god, this term, the meta game. And so you kind of have to rise to meet that based on what your players are giving you in terms of feedback on how they're playing the game.
Right.
And so in that sense, I don't know if a multiplayer shooter is ever truly finished.
Right.
It's just kind of this eternal painting. You're always just kind of adding more to.
Yeah, it's you kind of see a lot of that same kind of thing, like when it comes to fighting games. Kind of what you're saying about how balance is kind of depending on players. You definitely do see that in the fighting game community. It's like you'll see certain characters who are like we call them scrub friendly. So it's like people who are like they've initially picked up the game. That they haven't had enough time to get good and everything. It's like the characters have easy input. They have overpowered moves, so like kind of like at a low level, it's like they kind of perform very well, and then it's like as players get better and better at the game, there's like certain characters who are a little more difficult from a technical standpoint, that they'll usually have like an edge over these kind of easier to play characters. So it's like those characters like at a higher level end up doing better, and then finally you have the characters and strategies and everything, which like on paper, it's like they're incredibly good. It's like these are things that are like so technically difficult to pull off, and basically require like basically human perfection. And so it's almost like if humans could like shed their limits and like become gods, it's like all of a sudden like these characters would be even better. So it's like balance. Like, it kind of depends on like what level you're talking. And when you're talking about how it's like you can bring in all the best QA testers and everything, the competitive people are going to be so much more motivated to find some kind of strategy, or
Yes.
they want to find anything they can to kind of get an edge, and they're just going to have a completely different level of motivation.
Yeah, and one thing that we're trying to do too is have different game modes that address that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, so because you've got some people that like the duel type of game, the 1v1, and then you've got people. I think that the current trend in gaming, I don't want to say overall, but it seems like people like team-oriented games a lot better.
Yeah.
That's why you're seeing a move away from things like StarCraft and Quake.
Right.
And a move more towards things like MOBAs, where it's like, it's not my fault we lost, it's because my team sucked. Or whatever.
Yeah.
But so I think that through doing game modes, and we'd like to go for more of a team-oriented game, but will also have the ability to duel with people. Because there's another good game that's out, Wickland, and that one is fantastic, and it's very unique in the way that it handles a lot of the things that it has in it. But there aren't a lot of people playing it, not like there should be.
Right.
And some people have said because, they are looking at, they had a write-up where they were talking about, the fighting games and things like that were what were kind of influenced them. And so, they wanted to make a more duel-oriented game. And I don't know, that seems to be a niche within a niche as far as shooting games.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a tricky thing because like arena shooters, like multiplayer games in general, their primary selling point is basically the audience, having other people to play with. And if you get too niched with it, you might have like an enthusiastic audience, but you're probably going to have a small audience. And because of that, it's like when people go to play the game, they're going to see like, oh, well, not many people are playing or no one's playing. And then they're going to check out and take themselves out of the pool. And so like because of that, like these, you can have like real trouble staying afloat.
This is a big problem in these sorts of things. I know that somebody said that a good axiom to go by is never make a multiplayer indie shooter.
Yeah,
because of that very reason.
Right.
You get into the thing. I'm thinking of games like here's a good game, Strike Vector. You ever seen this one?
I've heard of it.
Pretty awesome game, but then it goes on sale all the time on Steam, and then people will say, well, nobody plays that game because nobody plays it.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So you're kind of in that catch-22.
Exactly.
And we were at one point looking at putting a single-player part of our game in there, and we may do something like that before all is said and done. But right now we're just looking at, I think for a smaller dev, the best thing you can do is just kind of make an infrastructure of your own and build whatever audience you can.
Right.
If we just have a few people playing and they're having a good time doing it, then I feel like we've done a great job. What we're going to be doing is having regular leagues and tournaments. And,
cool.
There will be places where you can play the game and you can find people at your skill level to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of give people a community and do a little bit of building of that type of, atmosphere,
right,
so to speak, to give them and see where it goes from there, because that's really all you can do without the marketing of an EA or somebody like that.
Yeah.
You have to kind of do what you can with what you've got in front of you. Yeah.
But, I will say that, like, because, and as Unreal Tournament starts to come out, this might not be true, but these big games, these big companies, like they did really have like a solid foothold, on the arena FPS market, and because they've kind of dropped the ball on that, so to speak, it kind of has given an opportunity for other developers such as yourself to kind of jump in there and kind of seize that.
Yeah, it's a wide open thing right now, and I guess I'm excited that all these arena shooters are coming out. Not all of them will make it to the finish line. Not all of these projects. If you go to and shout out to my friends Neepal and Galanguar from the Arena FPS subreddit, they track this stuff, and I think there's about 15 games that they've got tracked right now that are arena shooters that are freshly released or that are in development. And some people are just like, why don't we just pick the one that does the best and we'll go with that? It's like, well, why don't we just go eat at McDonald's every day because it has won the popularity wars of fast food, therefore it is the pinnacle of... No, I think that it's kind of exciting to me that there's about to be all these choices for people to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, making your voice heard in that, yeah, sometimes it's pretty difficult, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, like you said, there's just, I think a lot of this has come from, I mean, it's a wider, just kind of indie game thing too, where it's like, I mean, so many more games are released on Steam now than at basically any point in history. I think there was like an article last year on Gama Sutra that came out in like March or April, and it was like more games have been released on Steam this year than last year. So it's like, oh god.
I bet you've got games in your Steam library that you've never played.
Right? Yeah. And I mean, because of stuff like that, like, it drives me crazy when people are like, rank is too short, it's too short. And I'm like, I can look at the Steam achievements, like, most of you haven't gotten past the 3rd level, so, like, what?
You got Steam Workshop. If they want to build stuff, they can. That's.
There's extra game modes. Like, I can assure you haven't gotten all the treasures and secrets. So there's plenty more to explore. But no, I mean, people want stuff they can burn through more quickly, and that takes so much time to develop.
Yeah,
it's so hard.
Well, and I keep seeing that go back and forth, because then there's the people that say, well, I'm paying this much money, I want at least 20 hours, 40 hours, 60 hours,
Yeah, I totally understand.
I want Witcher 3 levels of, crap to do. But then there's the people like, ain't nobody got time for that, people that are just like, make it quick.
Right.
Like Battlefield single player or something.
Yeah, it was just rough because like we were kind of making it for we were making it for an audience that would kind of like appreciate kind of like the effort and everything that went into it. I mean, it was like, you think back to like NES games, like Mega Man was short, it was 8 levels, 9 levels, whatever it was, and I mean, a lot of games were like that. This like Rekt in a lot of ways was trying to emulate that, and we were trying to like give people like a really short but high quality experience, and it's just. I mean, I understand the people who wanted something longer, because there's a lot of people who they're trying to kill time or whatever. But it was just sad that like the other audience, people who appreciate a small but quality experience didn't really speak up or seem to appreciate it. But it's a tough thing.
Yeah, but I mean, now that we have things like Steam Workshop, which I think is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if somebody wanted to, they could make their whole campaign, for Rekt or anything that they felt was missing, they could add to it. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I mean, we are definitely on #Rekt. We are definitely going to be allowing people to do maps and mods and stuff. Yeah, we're going to try to come up with a very basic SDK for it that will allow people to make simple maps. That's the plan right now. And of course, if you've got Unreal Engine 4, which is free, be able to do quite a bit with it. But yeah, we definitely want to encourage people to make more content. I think that history has shown that when you give people the opportunity to do that, you extend the life of your game. I think a lot of the problem is that in modern gaming, that's really not something that's prized as something that the developers want.
Right. Because
they want to say, hey, next year at this time, we're turning off the servers for this one. You got to buy the next version.
Right.
So they don't really want you to add years of gameplay to their titles.
Right.
But the average person who enjoys the game and has put time into it, that they would like to extend that life as long as possible. And especially in indie games and indie shooters like this, I think it's a very valuable thing to accept input from anybody who is willing to put in the time to make it. I mean, already we've had people make stuff for #Rekt. I mean, we had a mini server browser thing, the day after we put out our first release that some community guys had made. So, I mean, so from the start we have supported that, but I think it's important, and I hope that it becomes more important for the industry at large again.
Yeah. I mentioned in the intro of the last episode about how, like, when it comes to arena shooters specifically, like, modding has had a huge impact. It's like even in the early days of Quake, it's like one of the more popular mods was, the CTF mod, 3-wave CTF, which, in addition to adding a CTF, add a grappling hook, which was, I know everyone, including me, had a ton of fun with. It is
Quake
it is
Fortress.
A little... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying Quake Fortress. I remember all those.
Yeah.
And you and JR were talking about those CDs that you get, for like $5 that have a shitload of Doom wads on them.
Yeah. Oh man, those were great. I mean, not the levels, but I don't know, like the time, I guess I'm talking about. those are good days. But I don't want to get into I mean, speaking of body, it's almost obligatory at this point. It's like when it comes to body, like I have to bring it up. So, what do you think of the whole like paid mods thing and like kind of how it all kind of backfired?
It was a little surprising how that all went down. I think that if anybody can find a way to do it in a way that's palatable to people, I think it's Steam. Mm-hmm. But I don't know.
They're pretty smart.
The backlash was, they tend to, they're, even when they've had setbacks, it's like, no, give them time. They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
CSGO came out. All the pros were like, no, this sucks. We're going to stay with 1.6. No, we're going to stay with Source. Source is better. No, screw you. 1.6 is better. Oh, that war again. Okay. And now that, it's like, no, man, it's Valve. Give them time. They'll figure it out. And sure enough, now CSGO is arguably the biggest competitive shooter. So it's
30,000 upvotes on Steam, something like that.
Wow. Yeah. So I think it's only a matter of time before we figure out some way to monetize this stuff properly. But I think it's fair and just to do so. Especially, I don't know, there's something about actually getting your hands dirty and doing this stuff that gives you a lot more. I don't know, like we're sitting there talking shit about games on Steam Greenlight, but you know what? I got mad respect for anybody that puts out a game, even if it's not a great game, even if it's not, earth shattering, or if it's, the mechanics are poor or this or that, Total Biscuit was mad because it didn't have an FOV slider, whatever, man, you got to the finish line. You got that thing out.
But by the way, quick correction, 510,000 upvotes for CSGO on Steam.
Wow.
Oh boy.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Well, just for the record, we do have an FOV slider.
Good, excellent.
Okay. So we wanted to make sure we got that in.
You need to get that to the Cynical Brit as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So shower it with praise.
Actually a cool guy. I met him at IPL 5, a sterling gent, I must say.
Was that? I missed that. What about Sterling?
I was talking, not Jim Sterling. I've never met him. I've met Total Biscuit.
Oh, okay. Was he at like some convention you were at, or what?
I did some casting for, we were talking about Shootmania earlier at
right,
IPL
yeah, he was into that.
Was a pretty big event in Las Vegas, and he was doing some casting there as well, and got to talk to him a little bit, and turns out he has a background in the radio industry too, so I had a lot to talk about with him. And
what a surprise! Given his voice.
Yes, yeah, he's a natural, man.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, you sound like you've had your share of a casting experience too.
Yeah, that's where I kind of got my start in all this stuff, was doing casting. But yes, I did radio before that.
Oh, awesome.
And through casting, I got with a team of guys who are kind of the Harlem Globetrotters of video games, kind of the secret Illuminati cabal of video games. And we...
Illuminati confirmed.
Yes, confirmed, yes. And several of us got the wild idea to try to make our own game about a year or so ago. And that was the genesis of where we're at now.
Cool.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Where it's going, God only knows, but we've been very happy with the progress. But yeah, like I was saying, making games is hard.
Oh yeah.
I don't have to tell you this, Brad Carney.
No, you do not. You do not.
It is a difficult process, and I salute anyone who has gone through it successfully. But it also takes longer than you thought. You think, oh yeah, I can get but there's always going to be more things come up, and it just, it's like any software project though. Just tack on some extra time, arbitrarily, and you're okay.
Right. Yeah. I do admit, I have gotten bit by my own arrogance a little bit. Kind of when I first got into the industry, it's like I kind of saw like some of the people who were, kind of doing things, and it was like, oh well, how hard could it be? I'm smarter, more talented, and harder working than all these guys. I could certainly do better. And what I kind of didn't realize is like they kind of had like the network and kind of the experience and all that kind of stuff, and kind of an established history, all of which like go an incredibly long way. It's like these guys were kind of starting, like in a really good spot, whereas I was kind of starting with nothing really. I kind of very much, and not just that, like, there's so many day-to-day challenges that you go through when like developing a game. It's far harder than like I ever anticipated. And by the way, like as Valve has opened the floodgates and tons more games are being developed, it's not getting any easier. There's just tons more competition out there. There's people also have to realize, like, we're in the entertainment industry, and because of that, we're competing with all forms of entertainment. We're not competing with like other games. We're also competing with movies. The golden age of television. I don't know, drugs, anything people do for entertainment, and it's just so difficult. Like it's getting just progressively more and more difficult. Like people have no idea how hard it is to catch people's attention for more than a short period of time. It's incredibly difficult.
Sure, it's a voice in the wilderness, and then I hear people say, well, if these people that are professionals at this shit, they'll tell you have 10 seconds.
Right, yeah.
That's it, man. Yeah. You got 10 seconds to grab somebody with your project or idea or whatever. It's like, well, what if you're making something that's really difficult to convey the entire nuance and all of what you're doing in 10 seconds? Well, tough shit, buddy. You got 10 seconds, on to the next thing. I mean, it's just there's so much of it, like you say, and it's really hard to be heard above the din, I suppose.
So here's something interesting, because I've been ever since I don't know about failure, but kind of lackluster performance of Rekt on the sales scene. I've been reading a whole bunch of like kind of marketing books and everything. Probably should have done this beforehand.
Man!
But hey, better late than never. But one of the things I've been reading is like once people like make up their mind about something, it's basically impossible to change their mind. It's like once, and for example, I'll give you an example of how this is relevant. Like Honda, like the car company, like in different countries, they make motorcycles, and like they're very good motorcycles, like very high quality and everything. But you don't see Honda motorcycles here in the United States. Why is that? Because when you think of Honda, you don't think motorcycle. And people when they think of Honda, like they think car, mid-size sedan, whatever it is. And like the amount of effort it takes, marketing dollars it spends to convince people, like, hey, we make motorcycles too. It's impossible. Like you cannot, like once people like have their minds made up on something, like no, Honda means car, like you cannot change their mind. Like it's impossible. And that kind of fits right into the 10-second rule of what you're talking about. It's like if you don't make like the perfect impression like in that first 10 seconds, people are already going to develop some other idea of your game, like, oh, this looks bad, or whatever, and you can't change their mind at that point. Like they're too stubborn, they're too ingrained in that. And that's why, it's like when you're trying to, like find new people, like for your, your product or game or whatever, you always want to like go and try and find agnostics. It's like people who don't have any kind of like prior opinion to you or any kind of competitors or anything. It is a trillion, billion, quadrillion, insert made up number here, times harder to convert like someone who actively thinks like another way about something. So it's like if you were like making Unreal Tournament and you were trying to like go around to convince all the Quake fans to come play your game, good luck with that. You're going to fail completely. So it's like you have to do something different to appeal to different people, or just appeal to people who haven't heard of Quake yet and go on and started playing it.
Yeah, man. Well, and plus our minds are kind of, in a cognitive sense, they're just these little sorting machines. So we automatically start trying to fit things as quickly as we can into what our previous experience was.
Oh, okay. Exactly.
I remember at QuakeCon when I was sitting there talking to you, and some kid comes up and he looks at your game, for like 2 seconds. So like Borderlands. Well, anybody that's played Rekt and or Borderlands can tell you there's not a damn bit of, because there's some cell shading or whatever.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And there's guns in it.
Right, yeah.
That's it. But, he had made his assessment. Oh, so it's like Borderlands. No, it's not like Borderlands. But
no, it's not a chore simulator, no. Oh, shots fired. Anyway.
But
they're big boys.
We tend to pigeonhole things.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of it is because of what we're talking about here. That there's just so much that you're trying to process it all as quickly as you can, and when you're faced with a Steam sale like the one you guys are on today, where it's like your game and 100 and something other games. It's like, okay, I'm going to go through, what's on sale on Steam? Oh, there's 100 and something games to go through here. Yeah. Okay, so, there's, the attempts that they're making towards curation are interesting, and I think that nobody has really solved this as far as movies, music, any sort of entertainment. I mean, nobody has really solved the issue of curation, other than you got some people that, are on YouTube or something like that you kind of trust their opinion on, or that they have similar tastes, and you can kind of look at those things and see. But that is one of the overall things that I think is going to be a big issue in the years to come for all forms of entertainment, but especially in gaming too, is how do you curate this stuff? If the average person doesn't have time to sit there and go through 100 and something games and decide which one is the right one for them, or which, several of those is right for them. So, even if it might be something that if they sat down and played it, they would love it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really hard right now in that sense.
Yeah, I don't know. We've definitely had our struggles there. Because, I mean, you've been there. I mean, we take it to, Quake kind of in conventions, and people sit down with the game, and they just love it. I hope you can't hear that lightning on that.
I can. I don't know if you could hear it over here, too, but yes.
So, hey, if there's a bit of there's a break here at some point, you all know why.
Well, it adds weight to your words. You say, yes, these are difficult times for games.
Yeah, exactly. And then I had this eureka moment. But I mean, and it is interesting you bringing that up. I think a lot of it is up to you, the developer, designing a game that is going to hit the right notes, in that first 10 seconds when people see it, so to get them interested in the first place, having solid design principles, but and then at the same time, the way it is right now, and I think this is changing to at least some extent, is that a lot of the curation is basically done by publishers. I know it's done like that with movie studios. It's like because it's 20th Century Fox, you're gonna get your movie on 4,000 movie screens, or whatever it is. Whereas like if you make the same movie and it's even a little bit better, but you don't have that studio behind you, you're gonna have trouble getting it shown anywhere.
Yeah, but arguably those marketing techniques have ruined things in the long term as well, because you'll hear they'll spend millions of dollars for 2 or 3 weeks, to a month leading up to a movie's release, and you'll see it everywhere, and then they only take how it did that first weekend as whether it's a hit or a flop.
Right.
Now I'm old, so when I was a kid, I remember that movies would have legs. People may not go the first weekend, but they hear that it's good from the people that did go, and then all of a sudden they're like, you gotta go see this movie. And then so, the same movie's still playing 2 months later, but it's building crowds. But now, I mean, in books and movies and in games too, it's like, well, you put your game out, and it was out all weekend since Tuesday, and didn't do well, so your game's a flop.
Right.
And that, I don't know that that's fair.
Right.
And
it's definitely different when it comes to games, because especially on Steam, like, you have the ability to update your game and do things, have promotions and whatnot. Or it's like a movie, it's like once it's out, like, it's done. Unless you have your like director's cut DVD.
Director's cut, yeah. Yeah, you can extend the long tail a little more in gaming, and that does help. And we are definitely going to be doing that through just whatever we can in terms of content. And in the future, we definitely are going to be doing some sort of single player type of, I don't know if it'd really be a campaign, probably something a little more roguelike procedural generation type of thing, but something that adds to it.
Right.
But, it's like, you can keep doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And, I mean, that's, this next game we're working on, like, part of why I'm so excited about it is because, like, it's much more conducive to that format. Rekt was like basically just kind of like handmade single player kind of thing. So it's like, even though it's like we would put out updates for it, like really revamp and overhaul certain things, most people would kind of feel like, oh, well, I've played it, there's no reason to go back to it. But whereas like, the format of this new game, it's much more, there's reasons to, go back to it over and over. So, it means that, we can kind of keep working on it and keep updating it and, hopefully doing exciting things, and our effort won't be in vain because, people will actually have a reason to come back to it.
So we're not going to get more information on what that game is, right?
I've said before, it is a tower defense game. It's basically a new Rekt game, but it's like a first-person tower defense with some other little elements thrown in. I hope to talk more about that in the future. But
absolutely, yeah. At least it's not, your favorite characters from Rekt are back in MOBA form.
Well, no, it's not a MOBA. It's not a MOBA.
Like CCG, yes. Move over Hearthstone.
You're gonna be at QuakeCon, right?
Possibly. We're going to be at SGC, I know, this year, but not sure on QuakeCon just yet. We're still firming up our summer convention schedule, I suppose, for Hell Legit Games.
Where can people find that stuff?
Oh, you can go to helllegitgames.com, and we are hoping to push a new update fairly soon. The plan is to do at least one more big update before SGC and do an online tournament, and then have a release in time for that convention. So yes, helllegitgames.com. You can at least play and try the game, and it is free, and will probably be free. We've been looking at different business models, and I think we've kind of decided that it's hard to beat free.
Yeah, it is.
Especially for a multiplayer type of game.
Right, especially when the audience is kind of the selling point.
Yes, and you can find us on Twitter at helllegitgames. You can find me on Twitter at winnerswiththe1. And yeah, we're going to keep working and doing stuff and letting people know about it. I mean, that's really all we can do is just keep shining that light in the darkness, man.
Sounds awesome. Well, I wish you guys the best of luck and everything on that. Definitely keep me posted so I can so I can shout into my tiny little megaphone to help get that message out there a little more. So.
Absolutely, will do. And thanks for having me on the show today.
Hey, no problem.
It's an exciting time for arena shooters, and it's really, I think this year and next year are going to be a resurgence for the genre. Whether people are ready for that or not, I don't know. But I mean, the games are there. I think a lot of the player base is ready for it. There's kind of a weariness with the standard kind of tactical type of shooter, and people just want to bounce around and kill things and have fun and do it with some speed. And so I think that if you're into arena shooters, this is a second golden age. Let's hope. Let's keep our fingers crossed for that.
Well, I certainly hope that's the case. Alright, so that was my conversation with Winters. Managed to get through that whole thing without being destroyed by thunderstorms and floods. You know, I've got to say, these conversations keep getting better and better. Definitely enjoyed that one, and I was blown away by some of the glitches and oversights he was describing. The one about well, you can make this jump at a certain frame rate but not a different frame rate, that one blew my mind. Like, the fact that players can discover that, and not only that but exploit it, it just really goes to show just how skilled some of the players are at these arena shooters. And just real quick, their game, #Rekt, I think it'll be on Greenlight soon. I forgot to ask them about that, but as far as I can tell from their plans, it should be on Greenlight soon, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that. And before we go, I want to make sure that I credit the music. It is from Quake 2, because arena shooters, it fits, and it's awesome. It's actually quite a bit more awesome than I remember it being. Maybe I didn't quite give it the chance it deserved back in the 90s, but it certainly holds up. Anyway, we'll be back next week to wrap up our series on arena shooters. Until then, thank you for listening, and talk to you next time. Bye.